Good evening. Welcome to this evening's talk entitled Four Murals of Imagination. My name is Julia McHugh and I'm on the board of the library. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd like to highlight two upcoming events. Actually, one ongoing and one upcoming. The ongoing event is our annual art auction, which you may have noticed down here near the circulation area and also upstairs. And there's some really terrific art this year: paintings, textiles, hand-carved wooden bowls, and some really cool fishing lures. That's kind of unusual. The art auction lasts until August 27th. And
26th, I'm sorry.
26th?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And it's your chance to get a beautiful piece of art or many beautiful pieces of art and to support the library. And we're very grateful to the artists that have donated their works for this fundraiser for us. The upcoming event is on August 11th. It is an annual talk that we give called Conversations at the Causeway. This year it will be Christina Rodriguez, who's a professor of law at Yale University. She'll be speaking on universities, law, and the public trust. And her conversation will be with Jeannie Rhee on the challenges confronting universities and the legal profession. It should be very interesting. 5:30 at the Red Barn, August 11th. And I think it's wise to reserve on the Southwest Harbor Library website because it can get quite crowded. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Judith Goldstein. She is no stranger to the library. A year ago, she spoke on Belle DaCosta Green, who was the first librarian and director of the Morgan Library. She is a historian, author, and founder of Humanity in Action, an international educational organization that fosters civic leadership. Judith Goldstein received her master's and PhD degrees from Columbia University. She is the author of books and articles, including Crossing Lines, about the integration of Jews in Maine. And also, one I would really like to read is Majestic Mount Desert 2, a collection of essays on island history. She is a seasonal resident on Soames Pond, lucky her, and lucky us, is going to speak to us this evening on four painters and their murals.
I feel like I'm surreptitiously wired. And all sorts of stuff, so if it falls out or doesn't work, just
Let's see.
let me know. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good. So it's wonderful to be back at this library and share thoughts with you. I want to thank Kate in particular and the staff and all of you for being here. I think it's a kind of indulgence on your part that I, on my part, am taking advantage of. This is not a talk about Mount Desert, nor is it a talk about mega issues such as resistance and rescue, as was the case with the explorations about Danish Christian morality during the Second World War. Nor is this a talk about the desperate state of America and its influence on the world. And this is not another talk about the great Black director, Belle DaCosta Green, of the Morgan Library, who passed for white, was Black, and the late 19th century posters, stunning posters in the collection of Leonard Lauder, posters just showing women in particular reading magazines and books. This is a talk about the power of art to convey liberating images and ideas that some outstanding artists shaped through their work. The particular choices of the artist and the art may appear serendipitous or idiosyncratic. They probably are. In fact, somebody asked how I came to the fore, and the answer is I don't know. Anyway, one can never account for the strange path of discoveries and attempts to make them connect. But I can't resist trying to share thoughts with you about the murals created by Howard Gardiner Cushing, Marc Chagall, Thomas Hart Benton, and Faith Ringgold. Three are American. One was born in Russia, but lived most of his life in France. What they have in common is that they were exploratory artists who on occasion reveal stories and evoke them imaginatively through their art, and particularly in the form of murals. They are revelatory, liberating works that powerfully and beautifully convey much about the artists themselves and the four vastly different worlds that inspired and shaped them as artists. They didn't wait for critics to tell the world what the art was about, although there is much literature on the works. While they didn't know each other, all four sought inspiration in Paris. In fact, Cushing, Chagall, and Benton were in Paris in the early 1900s, roughly at the same time, enrolled in art school and exposed to the vibrant Parisian literary, artistic, and sexual avant-garde. I don't think the three ever met. In varying degrees, they absorbed that Parisian world of artistic and social sexual experimentation, which is part of the fascination about the very different works and the very different worlds they came from. Let me start with Howard Gardiner Cushing. Can we do the first picture? Okay, this my savior. Okay, that's Cushing and his wife. He was born in 1869 into a wealthy Boston mercantile family, confident of his place in the financial and social hierarchy of the city. After attending Groton and Harvard, he decided, or he dedicated his life to being an artist. Although of lesser talent than his contemporaries and friends, John Singer Sargent and Whistler, Cushing shared a passion for art and some recognition as a fine painter of portraits, seascapes, and murals. His subjects were mainly the rich society figures in Boston, New York, including his wife and family members who would appear sat contentedly and beautifully for his fine portraits. He was a Newport man who from time to time worked in Bar Harbor. He felt at home, even if Mount Desert was a competitor resort to Newport, since both exclusive summer resorts facilitated acceptable family marriages among America's upper class. Cushing's family wealth derived from the China trade, in which engendered a deep interest and love of Chinese and Japanese art. He never had to work to sustain or enhance the patrician life, nor did he worry about selling his work. An accomplished and diligent artist, he worked hard at painting and cultivating friendships with kindred spirits such as Whistler and Gertrude Whitney, the heirs who came from Vanderbilt wealth and then married exceedingly well into the Whitney fortune. The marriage was hardly a love match. As husband and wife, they mainly lived separate lives. He rode horses, and she became an acclaimed sculptress. And while her work mainly adhered to traditional forms, she moved in the cultural and social milieu of the literary and art avant-garde in Paris, especially the cafe world and in New York. So both Cushing and Whitney made repeated visits to Paris to enhance their artistic careers, and Whitney in particular to add daring flavor to her life. Both were in the city in 1910 when they went mad over Sergei Diaghilev, the founder and director of the Ballet Russe, in 1909. The company presented exotic, Eastern Oriental, sexually provocative, often androgynous and homosexual themes through dance, stage design, and costumes, as well as nudity when needed. So the next picture is Ida Rubinstein, a Russian ballerina and femme fatale, and this is a Cushing portrait. And she was a stunning hit who disrobed on the stage to wide for Parisian audiences. Cushing painted this stunning portrait of her, not in the flesh, but seductive in a multicolored low-cut dress surrounded by a plethora of black flowers, often poisonous, seeds and fruits that conveyed dark, symbolic meaning to Parisian and international writers and artists and titillated audiences. So this is all filled with symbolic meaning. And people who know flowers and also know very important French literary works from the beginning of the 20th century that describe the relationship of the image to novels, to French novels in particular. So soon thereafter, the spirits of the exotic, erotic, and mysterious East, the Paris-based mix of Russian, Middle Eastern, Japanese stories and art, emerged in 1911 and 1912 on the splendid Whitney estate. On Long Island's North Shore, the Gold Coast was known for its chateau-like structures, exquisite gardens, horses, and polo fields. Gertrude, however, stood her artistic ground on 650 acres of her own in the middle of the vast Whitney estate. She commissioned the prominent architect William Adams Delano to create a two-story retreat studio of stunning classic proportions surrounded by gorgeous gardens. So let's go to those pictures. Oh, no. Oh, I forgot to show you this. Oh, look, this is the values, and this is sort of a modern one that drove Paris mad. This is for me. They were the best.
Makes me think Alexander McQueen.
What's that?
The art show Alexander McQueen, so I did costumes like that. And others
Right. I think it belongs to the Costume Institute from here. But I tell you, that's extra. All right, now let's go on to there's another image, but I think enough of that. Okay, so let's go to the Whitney estate. So this was the Whitney, this was the studio. This is her studio that she built. And then you'll see another image where it's really, there you get it in its grandeur. And that's just her, it's part of the 650 acres that she had on the estate. But it's very, very beautiful. And then there's a picture of the interior. It's quite impressive. It's good enough for non-dessert. I think like this. Anyway, so she commissioned Marc Chagall to embellish part of the interior. And he created a 12-panel mural extending 70 feet, known as the Whitney Studio Mural, that rose along a curvaceous stairway from the first to the second floor. So this is the mural that he painted. And then you'll see, because Kate found the picture, we lost it?
I lost it.
She found the stairway in all of its circular, who knows what, very complicated. But this is it. So this starts from the first floor and it goes up to the second floor. Okay, so in the spirit of Scheherazade in 1001 Nights, the images are set in fairy tale landscapes with caliphs and courtesans, cactus flowers, aquamarine trees, ponds, and images of Cushing's wife Ethel and Gertrude Whitney herself. So we've got two pictures to show the next ones. Okay, so this is Gertrude Whitney, and she's in costume by Faré, who was the costume designer for the Ballet Russe, and looking quite exotic, with all sorts of symbolic plants surrounding her. And then his wife sitting there. Interesting. Now these images, this is not from the Whitney estate. This was shown in a gallery in New York recently, but you can get a sense of the scale of this. The word is deliciously decorative and derivative of the Parisian literary world of hidden sexual symbols and meanings. Both the wife and patron wear costumes, which Leon Basque and Paul Paré designed for the Ballroos. Whitney in a striking black and white tunic and pinkish pants, and Ethel equally exotic in a pink costume framed by a black canopy held by female attendants. Both women are surrounded by stunning plants and flowers for the informed, harbored sinister and even poisonous qualities. The mural is a striking example of the work of this proper Bostonian Newport artist, who is this his finest work, pushed beyond his native conventional social and cultural boundaries. Some of his social milieu found the subject matter unacceptable and said so in public. But his familiarity and fascination with Middle Eastern and Oriental cultures compelled him to transcend via Paris his comfortable provincial Boston and Newport backgrounds and print images that invoked a seductive foreign world. Sadly, only 4 years later, at the age of 47, he died of rheumatic fever. As was the case with Cushing and Whitney, Paris around 1910 drew artists of privilege from across the English Channel and Atlantic into an exotic international world. The city also irresistibly attracted artists with no money, no privilege, and low social status. Fierce ambition and the hunger for artistic fame sufficed. Marc Chagall was one of them. Chagall, and we'll show Chagall and his wife Bella coming in the next that's Chagall and Bella. You've seen them in images in the air and the rest of it. Anyway, so Chagall was born in the Russian city of Vitebsk, a city of 65,000 people, half of whom were Jewish, and it included 30 Russian Orthodox churches and 30 synagogues. The city was part of the Pale of Settlement, where 5 million Jews were forced to live. The Jewish population had a small middle class, but mostly poor Jews were turned inward to their own language, Yiddish, and religion and culture. Christians and Jews lived in fraught contact, two cultures suspicious of each other for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, one with power and one almost totally without. Chagall, born in 1887, was the first of 9 children and the favorite of his mother. His father was a laborer, his mother ran a grocery shop, which over many years prospered to the point that the family became the middle class. He went to Cheder, the Jewish religious school, which left him with no ambition and a bleak future. And he wrote, "Sometimes I will stand and gaze at myself thoughtfully." I think that's interesting. Gaze at myself thoughtfully. I'm going to try that. Anyways, what is the meaning of my youth? I'm growing up in vain. At home, nobody ever asked me what trade or profession I would want to study. Besides, I could scarcely imagine at that time that I would ever be able to do anything useful in my life. His ambitious mother intervened, bribed a teacher on the Christian side of the city to accept Chagall into school, which restricted the number of Jewish students, and in the words of Chagall's fine biographer, launched her first child out of Jewish Vitebsk. Launched him out of, that is, when he went to the school, he was being launched out of this very provincial Jewish life. In Chagall, the school was totally alien, an alien land of Russian studies, and he hated it, and he did miserably. But it was there that he noticed the boy drawing. I'm quoting, "To me," Chagall wrote, "this experience was like a vision, a true revelation in black and white. I asked him, boy, how he managed such a miracle. Don't be such a fool," he replied. "All you need to do is take a book out of the public library, like the Southwest Harvard Library, and then try your luck at copying one of the illustrations out of it, as I am doing right now. Chagall went to the library, then to an art school in the city. He developed skills built on his inherent talent and intellectual ambitions. He made friends who enabled him to enter the imploding world of Russian art and Russian Jewish art. From Vitebsk, he went to St. Petersburg to draw and paint mainly of his Vitebsk world and studied with the artist and designer of ballet costumes, Leon Basque. St. Petersburg fueled his ambitions, especially to go to Paris. In 1911, a collector provided a small subsidy to enable him to study in Paris. He stayed for a year. No academy, he recalled, could have given me all that I discovered by gorging myself on the exhibitions of Paris, on its picture shop windows, its museums. Along with artists from Europe and the US, such as Cushing, he encountered cubism and an art world in experimental high tension. Quote, old artistic certainties had been dashed to pieces, wrote Jackie Bullschlager in her biography of Chagall. But, to continue the quote, but in the fragments, the infinite possibilities, the new pictorial language, fresh imagery, and previously inexpressible emotions. For Chagall, and here I quote, and he's now talking about the impact of Paris, what he saw in Paris, which then is represented in his paintings of Russia and town. And he wrote, the town seems to snap apart like the strings of a violin, and all the inhabitants, leaving their usual places, begin to walk above the earth. People I know well settle down on roofs and rest there. All the colors turn upside down, dissolve into wine, and like canvases gush forth. I suspect that no art critic could describe the chaotic, cubist-based work better than Chagall himself. This riot of animals, humans, often missing limbs, flowers, symbols, letters, churches, and the simple wooden houses of his childhood. He stayed in Paris for 2 years, then went back to Russia for the tumultuous years of World War I and the 1917 Revolution. His career was one of mad contributions, battles with artists and friends and teachers, all bringing little success and recognition. The spell of bad luck broke in 1920 and 21 when he was commissioned to paint murals for the new avant-garde Jewish theater in Moscow. Housed in a confiscated old mansion, nothing like vandals, a bedroom was converted into a 90-seat theater. And we can go and show, well, it'll come, we'll show you the diagram of the theater. The new Jewish theater was government sponsored as a way of bringing Russian Jews, of whom 97% spoke Yiddish, into the Russian communist state. Chagall, this is Chagall, incarnate by a friend of his. And this is one of the murals. There are several paintings. There are, I think, 15 works in all. So he obsessively worked for a month, produced Introduction to the Jewish Theater, consisting of 7 works on a large wall, the ceiling and panels. Many historians, including Chagall himself, consider this his greatest work. The largest of the work explodes Chagall's depictions of his chaotic Jewish life set into cubist forms, intersecting circles and angles that depict the frenzy of an upside-down world of humans, animals, and musical instruments. The murals tell multiple stories with multiple illusions, drawn out of Chagall's real and fantasy worlds of Jewish poverty and religious exploration. In the extended canvas, Chagall features himself carried by 2 of the theater's sponsors. Here, I guess he's carrying it, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's very hard to decipher exactly what he showed. But the images of instruments, Hebrew letters, prayers, wooden houses, man urinating and another being circumcised. It's not an autobiographical work, nor is it, does it present a fanciful story about some exotic world or life. It is a chaotic drama of the people that he both liked and hated in the theater and art world. And we could continue to show more of those images. It's all upside down. It's in these forms, these cut the world. And this is a diagram of the room. Behind these seats was the bedroom in the mansion. And that's what he worked on. And they were on the ceiling and they were on all the sides and whatever. And there are more images. This crazy world. And there, of course, his image looks very familiar. Chagall. So, the theater was an enormous success. The art was enthusiastically received. Chagall was not paid for the work, even as the theater moved to a larger venue. He did not receive the recognition that he wanted from the country in communist turmoil. 2 years later, he left Russia for good and went into exile. He moved back to France. In 1973, he was invited back to Moscow, in part to see the murals. They were laid out, they had been rolled up after they were shown in a few places. And in the 20s, they were rolled up and then put in a store in the bottom of the museum. So they were laid out in the floor of the Tretyakov Museum. He was stunned, and when he came to visit, they were unfolded. He was stunned to see them again and to see that they had been restored. He affixed his signature in oil paint and said, quote, "I was a good artist, wasn't I? Oh, was I young? I was so incredibly young then. That is painted with soul." He then returned to France and lived there until his death in 1985. And except for the 4 years, he was in France. Except for the 4 years when he went to live in America in exile to escape the German-occupied France. So let's go to Thomas Hart Benton. At the age of 17, the American artist Thomas Hart Benton went to Paris to become an artist. He was neither rich like Cushing nor poor like Chagall. He came from a distinguished Missouri family of politicians. He was rebellious, strong-willed, and sure of his artistic potential, but not of his skills and purpose. Unlike Cushing or Chagall, when he, Benton, went to Paris, he had done little work and showed little promise. He circulated among the avant-garde and searched the city's vast artistic culture in museums and galleries, salons, and cafes. Except for women, he was hardly intoxicated with the city and with vibrantly new artistic and political currents. The quarter, he said of the left bank, was overrun with geniuses. I was no good anywhere. In the company of the hardened internationalists and that Stein woman, I was merely a roughneck with a talent for fighting, perhaps, but not for painting as it was cultivated in Paris. He was there to learn the basics of painting, in part at the famous Julian Academy. He dabbled in impressionism and abstraction. He was a tabula rasa, unlike Cushing and Chagall, who came to the city each with an impressive body of work. There is no record of any interaction, by the way, among the three. He quit Paris after 3 years, and according to his biographer, Justin Wolfe, Benton had, quote, begun to develop a philosophy about the social function of art and immersed himself in the culture of the new art. He had been exposed to avant-garde experimentation, to masterpieces in the Louvre, to Spanish art, and to a variety of other young artists. He gave up on Paris, returned to the States, without committing to a definite style. Over the next decades, Ben lived in New York City, Martha's Vineyard, and traveled extensively in the Midwest, South, and North. He studied art, taught in art schools, exhibited, and began to get recognition for his increasing artistic skill in creating panoramic works, as well as small-scale drawings and prints depicting America's rural life. And we can begin to share this. Okay. He was one of many aspiring artists, New York-based artists seeking recognition, sales, and intellectual definitions about the workings of society. He moved in artistic and educational circles that sought to break out of America's academic and ideological and provincial confines. An important opportunity came in the early 1930s. In 1919, the New School for Social Research had opened in New York, in part through the generosity of Dorothy Payne Whitney Straight, sister-in-law of Gertrude Whitney. Straight gave an initial gift of $100,000 to launch the school for the study of, quote, grave social, political, economic, and educational problems of the day. In 1927, the school commissioned a new modernist building and hired Benton to make a mural for the boardroom. The painter, Reginald Marsh, described Benton's work in 1930, and this is really a doozy. The time was summer, and it was amusing to watch Benton, muscular in his underwear, sit low in his armchair, survey the mural, suddenly load his brush with a lot of tempera goo, crouch like a cat, spring across the room in a flying tackle, scrub the brush around in great circles, catch his breath, and then resume his place in the chair. He got no money for the murals. America Today, but the new school provided an enormous and apparently costly supply of eggs, which mixed with water and pigments in powder form made the paint. He worked for 9 months to complete America Today, consisting of 10 panels depicting the America that he knew well. And we have a whole series of these images. And his idiom revealed a muscular, Better?
I think so.
Okay. Sorry, I keep moving around.
It's okay.
Okay. Anyway, so his idiom revealed a muscular American realism, totally different from Chagall, of course. Set in 4 regions in the north, south, east, and west. Figures are engaged in hard work and hard leisure, but mainly work in familiar agrarian and urban landscapes. They are mostly white, with a few blacks depicted at work and play. Benton meticulously painted cascades, disjointed but interwoven sequences of landscapes along with the vertiginous vignettes of action, muscular labor, entertainment, and romance. He stacked the images one next to another, one on top of another. Machines, airplanes, factories, cows, rivers, boats, roads, skyscrapers, crops, tractors, dams, mines, coal, wheat, cotton, music, mountains, movies, dancing valleys. Not dancing valleys, dancing valleys. Preachers, lovers, boxers, Broadway theaters, bars, bank, and booze. It was generally well received. A year later, Benton painted another set of murals, The Art of Life in America, for the library in the New Whitney Museum on West 8th Street. A few years later, he gave up on New York, put Paris way behind him, openly dismissed the American and international avant-garde art, and developed a successful career as an artist of American strength and virtues. His semi-realist but highly muscular forms, mostly men and machines, extolled America's unique population and landscape as he vividly presented and treasured them. And they're now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Okay, so on to the last artist. In 1967, Faith Ringgold, the New York artist born in 1930, painted 3 large-scale works that she called murals. They were first shown in a gallery on 57th Street, right in the middle of the New York art market. She was gaining recognition as a black artist who was in full fury over the racial conflicts in the 1960s and before. The works were not commissioned to embellish the studio of a patron, the establishment of a new theater in post-revolutionary Russia, or the liberal philosophy of a new educational institution, as were those of Cushing, Chagall, and Benton. Those murals portrayed the imaginary exoticism of Cushing, the mad blend of animals, people, and instruments in Chagall's enraptured and escapist theatrical Russian Jewish world, or the robust, celebratory landscape of Benton's muscular and proud America. Ringgold's world focused on black and white America, engaged in physical, economic, and cultural conflict. Her work was thrown into the commercial art world at a time of deep racial tensions. She was a chronicler of black life and an unapologetic activist for black and women's causes. She was born in Harlem, studied at City College and City University, taught school in the city, obtained a master's degree, and in the 1950s and 60s began her work as a prolific and experimental artist of unmistakable passion and purpose. By the 1970s, she was a full-time artist. The murals, 3 large oil paintings in her American People series, are utterly clear in purpose. There is nothing mysterious or exotic. 2 are set within symbolic structures: the American flag and the American postage stamp. The 3rd mural takes its form from Picasso's Guernica. None are celebratory. The first one presents 3 intertwined symbolic figures set behind a bleeding flag. One of the figures holds a knife with blood on it in one hand, and the other across its heart, possibly in the symbolic form of pledging allegiance to the flag. The title is The Bleeding Flag. There's nothing hidden or obtuse in Ringgold's anger and sense of American betrayal. The second mural, U.S. postage stamp, commemorating the advent of Black Power, shows multiple images of black and white, male and female facial images, eyes and noses, that create a panorama of diversity and confrontation. The eyes are accusatory, giving the sense that these Americans are watching the country in its period of turmoil. And the third, D, speaks of chaos, blood, and fear, with lunging upside-down bodies and chaos and violence, made clearly in reference to Picasso's Guernica, which formed the most powerful statements from the war years of the mid-20th century.
Judy, is that Andy Warhol in the middle? On the floor?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. No, I don't.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
I don't think she was that person.
Oh, it's great. I just looked like
Yeah,
pictures of
no,
her.
no, I think they're all
Okay.
forms that she created. So Ringgold married, had children, taught at universities, traveled, and continued to experiment with various mediums. She presented various painted canvases surrounded by quilted fabrics with inscriptions of imaginative stories. So she's switching from the fury of the 50s to later forms. In 1992, she made the French collection, consisting of 12 painted works with quilted borders in recognition of that country's importance in the history of art and her own inclusive vision of that history. Ringgold wanted to create stories and statements which circulate around images of boldness, adventure, and the sense of belonging to a great art tradition. So this is an image of Paris. The next one is the picnic at Germany. The French Collection Part 1 shows an imaginary artist named Melissa taking over Germany, the home of Monet. Ringgold's alter ego, Melissa, asks, "Should I paint some of the great and tragic issues of our world. By the way, as she had done in the three that we just saw. Should I paint a black man toting a heavy load that has pinned him to the ground? Or a black woman nursing the world's population of children? Or the two of them together as slaves building a beautiful world for others to live free? No. I want to paint something that will inspire, liberate. I want to do some of this women art, magnifique. So she paints a picnic Jardinier with Monet's water lilies in the background, including 10 women, black and white, who were some of her friends and supporters. And on the slide, yes, she includes a naked Picasso set in the form of an odalisque. You see? Right down the bottom. She's very amusing. So Melissa's imaginary trip takes her to Arles for a group portrait, including Van Gogh. She goes to the Matisse Chapel in the south of France, in which she inserts her American family. And then she goes to Picasso's studio, where he's shown painting a black model on a bed in front of his famous Damoiselle d'Avignon. But I don't have those images, but her most delicious imagery, intrusion, is the painting Dinner at Gertrude Stein's. Ta-ta. And this, so this takes us back to Cushing, Chagall, and Benton, to the Paris of the 1920s. This was the avant-garde world that made artists and writers flock to Paris and absorb new techniques, people, and stories, or, like Benton, reject and leave it behind. Ringgold simply took it over. She absorbed what she found fascinating and added what mattered to her. So we see Stein, and Stein is below the image that Picasso painted of her. And we see Gauguin, and we see 10 artists and writers in all. So she inserts black artists and writers into these images, and she's completely recreating and reinterpreting what she thinks is important. She was emphatic and bold, and I quote, "The important thing for the colored woman to remember is we must speak, or our ideas and ourselves will remain unheard and unknown. The cafe is my academy, my academic, my gallery, my home. The artists and writers are my teachers and my friends, but Africa is my art, my classical form and inspiration." So this is Gertrude Stein, and then there's another one, which is the cafe. Yeah, it's Cafe des Artistes, and who does she have in there? She has all of her friends who are artists and writers. They belong. Faith's daughter, Michelle Walla, provides a succinct description of Ringgold's audacious inclusion into and appropriation of the legendary Paris world. Gertrude Stein anchors the center of the composition, which we saw, enthroned beneath her eponymous portrait by Pablo Picasso, who sits to her left. Maybe let's go back to the second one, Gertrude Stein. Yeah, okay. So to her left is Alice Toklas, and she joins her right. Listening to Zora Neale Hurston dictate a passage from her 1931 play, Ringgold. Also around the table are, from left to right, Leo Stein, James Baldwin, Richard Wright, Ernest Hemingway, and Langston Hughes. And standing behind them, attentively listening, is Willa Marie Simon, her creation, an invented character based on a combination of Ringgold's mother, Willa Posey, and Ringgold herself. Both in name and costume, Willa's identity extends that of the Ringgold's fashion designer mother, who helped her to use this inspiration of tapestry. While her journey of personal and professional discovery burrows from the artist's life. Now, in this imaginary world, thousands of miles from her family, Willa finds herself at Paris's creative epicenter, the salon at Stein's apartment. And let's go back to the Café des Artistes. And this is another description. Café des Artistes is an absolute celebration, this is a quote, of the French café and the role it has played in art through the centuries. Willie Maurice stands in the center of the café that she owns with a clientele of artists, writers, and movers and shakers, including Faith Ringgold, Romare Benton, Elizabeth Catlett, Ed Clark, Aaron Douglas, William H. Johnson, Sargent Johnson, Lois Malou Jones, Paul, right in the middle, Paul Gauguin, and Vincent van Gogh, Jacob Lawrence, and Amelia Lewis, Archibald Motley, Raymond Saunders, Augustus Savage, Henry Asawa Tanner, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, Maurice Rutilo, and Meta Val Warwick. This painting is packed full of people who need to have more attention shown on them from the art world and the general public. Ringgold is doing a lot of work of unerasing with these quilts. Each of the artists listed above to be remembered and honored for their work, acknowledged and appreciated. Ringgold made it up. Not just the art, but the story to express her artistic powers, or what is now referred to as agency. My process, quoting her, is designed to give us colored folk and women a taste of the American dream straight up. Since the facts don't often do that, I decided to make it up. This is the real power and joy of being an artist. We can make it come true or look true. I would suggest that Ringgold not only speaks for herself, but for three very different artists, Cushing, Chagall, and Benton. In the fantasy world of art, we can make it come true or look true. Unlike Ringgold, Cushing didn't have to justify his work. He was sure of his white upper-class standing and skillful and seemingly natural appropriation of an exotic Oriental tale. Thanks to Diaghilev and his Paris ventures, he definitely painted, that is Cushing, painted figures such as his wife and Gertrude Whitney, where they defined wealth, beauty, and sexual ambiguity. So Cushing intrudes into that literary world. Chagall was a master of a particular power and joy, in Ringgold's words. Up and upside down, human and animals, musical and Hebraic notations, houses and flowers, abstract forms, all to present as much of the unstable and poor Russian Jewish life that he observed and knew so well. Art, for Chagall, was a way of escape and exaltation, and hopefully fame and fortune, which did come to him. Benton was different. He didn't have to stretch too far to depict a dynamic, somewhat idealistic America that he left behind for his few years in Paris and New York. He boldly and without apology painted what he saw, and exaggerated, in his dynamic, powerful, proud, urban and industrial American landscapes, even in the midst of the horrendous depression in the 1930s. Ringgold unabashedly made up stories to gain ownership of a violent and prejudiced America that caused her grief, and ownership in the great French art tradition as well. She decided to make it her own by reimagining a French landscape that included black artists with equal status to established, famous white authors and artists. Where do these four stand in regard to their reputations in the current unstable world of validation, recognition, and impact? Sadly, Cushing, a fine artist, is little recognized today. Chagall is regarded as one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. Benton, although somewhat out of favor, is still considered a fine regional artist of a once proud American landscape. And Ringgold is increasingly valued as an artist of courageous scope, vision, skill, and impact. And where are the murals today? The Cushing murals were taken out of Gertrude Whitney's studio in Westbury, Long Island. Her extensive property over the years was just reduced to a few acres, and the building put up for sale. The murals are in storage, although two of the works were recently shown at the Cushing exhibition at the Cushing Museum that Gertrude Winchie paid for and named for Cushing after his death. Cushing's granddaughter, Alexandra Howard, has taken responsibility for the murals and the Cushing legacy. Many of his fine works were recently shown at the Newport Museum in the first retrospective in decades. The restored Chagall murals are on permanent display at the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow, though they do travel and have been shown in Israel and Italy. Thomas Hart Benton's America Today fell into decay over the years. The murals remained in the New School Library until the Equitable Life Insurance Company bought them in the 1980s and arranged for their restoration at the Williamstown Regional Art Conservation Laboratory, and an installation at the company's headquarters in New York, and then subsequent donation to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They are on display there now. In the 1950s, the Arts of Life in America were taken from the Whitney Library and sold for $500 to the New Britain Museum of Art, where they can be viewed today. Ringgold's The Flag is Bleeding is in the National Gallery of Art in Washington. D is in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And U.S. postage stamp is owned, I believe, by the ACA Gallery in New York. And finally, Dinner at Gertrude Stein's was sold at auction in May 1924 for $1,570,000. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
For the dinner and also for the cafe, how are the faces made? Are they painted on fabric? Painted on
Painted
fabric.
fabric. Yeah, exactly. And she wove around the, look, see all, you can't see it. All of this is the story that's sewn into the fabric. And this is all fabric that she made. Her mother worked in fabric. And so this is this combination, which is quite extraordinary. Shelley?
Just what's the scale? I have no idea what size we're looking at.
I don't know, big. Big, I'll get to the figures. I mean, they're not small.
Okay.
None of the work is small. Yeah, right, I'm sure that's right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. The images
Aren't they great? We have to thank Kate for the introductory image, because she compiled it, and I just think it's, I think that's nice. Look at the history. Well, thank you, the library.
Are you writing a book? Is this a book you're writing?
No. I don't think so. I don't know.
Maybe.
You know, I think the answer is not yet.
I don't know. Somebody said, how did I come to the idea of putting them together? And I don't remember. But somehow, you know, it's a, and I mean, well, I told you, you know this, you know the history.
You found out about Cushing's murals. You were talking to someone
Right.
related to Cushing
Right,
about the
Right.
murals. And you decided to contrast his work with 3 other people from the period.
right. And I had a book of the Chagall murals, which had been given to a very close Israeli friend, but I hadn't looked at it for years, and they were murals. The Benton murals I know about because I was involved in their restoration. Ringgold, I didn't know. But I went to an exhibition in New York, and there they were. And oh, I spoke to you. Yeah. You told me about her. That's what, so you're responsible for Ringgold. So it all comes together. Thank you. But she's powerful, and it's really important, I think, to end with her, because that's where it is. That's what's living. And
Where
that's
was
what
the
counts.
Cushing Museum?
What? Where is it? It's in Newport. It's the Newport Art Museum. And it's been sort of a back order and, you know, pretty much, what should I say, limited by the people who support it. They just want to keep it, you know, very conventional and to themselves.
Thank you.